Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
Oh, great. Oops, I keep going the wrong way. Where am I?
Well, that's clearly a high altitude desert, so my thoughts go to Altamira, but I know you like to stay in the US for your pictures, so that's somewhere out west someplace. So where is it
This is
exactly?
Colorado. This is the
Colorado.
Great Sand National Park, Sand
Ah,
Dune National Park, and Dunes National Park.
beautiful location, isn't it?
Yeah, I have never been, and I've been in and around there for a long time. I do have to go because that looks really interesting.
Yes.
So that brings us to an interesting topic. And the topic today is about connecting. We talk about value exchange a lot because it's the way we think the world wins in business and a lot of things. But it's about how do you tie value exchange to results? And this is what the topic of today is. And you're going to take us through three aspects of it, the three that we think are important. The first is to make sure you have a grounding on what the goal of your value exchange is. And we think there are two extreme goals of value exchange. One is that you're doing something to exploit an opportunity or take advantage of an opportunity you see. We call them gaps in the market or strategic gap in the market that you see can be either developed or exploited or furthered or whatever. And the other is you want to change something. And that change can be something that's perhaps in the not-for-profit world. You want to make the air cleaner. You want to reduce homelessness. You want to make people's lives better. That's one thing. Another thing is you want to change public opinion. All these things have a different value exchange in the expectation. You have to be dead clear about why you're doing that. Then there's a second aspect to it, and that is that in your mind, and this is something you think about, is the tie of the value exchange to the go-to-market plan. So however you're going to go to market, however that is takes place, it is the expression in reality of your value exchange because that's how you make it happen, how you deliver it through the go-to-market plan. And then third, it gets back to the third aspect of this that's critical is assess, decide, and accomplish. That you have to have a hard measure of the results that are coming out on a regular basis and assess it on the regular basis so that you can take that value exchange that you're delivering through the go-to-market and you can be maneuvering it so that it gets the results you want. And so you're going to talk about us through those three concepts. And at the end, you're going to say to us, I think you are, that we have to, that if we were to do one thing over the next few weeks, it's to make sure that we see that tie, that we can see the tie between the goals of our value exchange, the actual go-to-market plan and actions that are being expressed through the go-to-market that tie, and that we can also see the measurement tie. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and take a breath and get some caffeine.
All right. There's so much to say about not only go-to-market itself, but the way that go-to-market drives value exchanges and interacts with value exchanges. And as you just said, Tom, is assessed and adjusted in terms of both the value exchange and the go-to-market plan. So let's dive in. Think of it this way. Go-to-market starts with your mission of your strategy. Remember that mission is the way you're going to deliver on your vision, the reason you're doing this business activity. Then go-to-market is also expressed in the strategic initiatives you set out in your strategy. I'm going to accomplish this way. I'm going to accomplish this way. And then, of course, when you get to your business execution plan, you set out the exact details of that. Um, but let's start talking about some aspects of this that for a person, for a leader, to actually set out a good go-to-market plan, actually to set out a value proposition and value exchange executed through the go-to-market plan, The leader needs to understand the organization itself thoroughly. They need to understand, and this ties with their organizing structure, the resources, the people, the processes, the funding, what the organization can deliver. That is, can it deliver a value prop? Can it establish a value exchange? And if so, then how does it do it? And the how it does it is the go-to-market plan. That is, you cannot just say, well, I've got this ambitious strategy, and then fall back on your current go-to-market plan. You will not achieve your new strategy. You will not achieve your new mission. That there needs to be an absolute tie between what you want to accomplish in your strategy, the ability of your organization to achieve that, and then simultaneously the ability of your organization through your go-to-market plan to establish your value proposition and get your value exchange back. One of the things, and this, I'm about to embark on a topic that you and I will be coming back to frequently because it's so important these days. One of the important concepts here is the need to measure. You need to measure everything that you are doing. This is part of the assessment process. This is part of the adjustment process. And your assessments are both quantitative, numerical, or quantitative. How well are you doing? Are you achieving certain things? This is really the importance of metrics, both the qualitative and quantitative metrics, in telling you how effective you are at achieving your value exchange, which you do through your go-to-market plan. In fact, when you're looking at whether you are delivering your value exchange, you assess it through looking at the various parts of the go-to-market plan. Am I effective in doing this? Am I effective in doing this, and so forth. Remember that when you establish your business execution plan, you will establish the metrics for each part of your go-to-market plan. And these are assessed individually, routinely, and especially when you see something not working in the value exchange, you go back to the go-to-market plan to see if you can fix what's wrong and therefore reestablish or establish to begin with the value exchange. You can't look at the value exchange and say, oh, so this isn't working, and say, what do I have to fix in the value exchange? No, because the value exchange is a result. It's not a driver. You have to go to the drivers and measure the success of each of the drivers individually before you can tell what's not delivering on the value exchange itself. Now, whenever you start to think about metrics, you will obviously also think about data. Data is an important part of everything, and especially in part of your go-to-market plan, because especially these days, you use the data you collect to answer your metrics. Am I meeting my metrics through the analysis of data here? And that tells me whether my go-to-market plan is working. But what this means is that organizations need to stop and really think through how they're using data. What data do they have? What data can they collect? Do they need additional data? Do they need to set up additional data collecting processes? Are there analysis processes in place? Remember that raw data in itself doesn't tell you much. You need to do the analysis of the data to figure out whether you're meeting a particular metric. So it may be that when a leader is setting out the business execution plan, they need to not only define the metrics, but also make sure that the means of delivering on the metrics are in place, which involves the data. Like that. Um, Obviously, also, there are the concerns of the humans involved about making sure that organizations are using data appropriately, that there are no breaches, that there's no cybersecurity issue, and so forth, which simply adds to the burden of making sure that you're getting your data program correctly. Another point I'll make here is that it's so important that all of the details of your go-to-market plan are consistent and aligned in order to deliver your value proposition and therefore get your exchange. Any discord, any discontinuity, any contradiction in the details of your go-to-market plan will raise questions in the mind of your marketplace. And I'll give a few examples of this in a second. And because of that, you're not going to get your value exchange, but it also makes it a lot more difficult to figure out exactly what to adjust. If what you're starting out with is out of adjustment, then what do you do to get it into an adjustment that then can be measured? So don't overlook the need to make sure that everything's aligned to begin with, or else you're dumping additional work on yourself. And what this means is that your product design and functionality must match what your sales and marketing programs say, and your brand must match your modes of retail and wholesale, and your customer service must match your product and your means of retail and wholesale, and your brand, and so forth and so forth, across all of these different aspects of your go-to-market plan. And this is a point maybe to stop here and make sure people understand that in talking about go-to-market, we're talking about the whole range of market-facing activities. Some people define go-to-market as simply your marketing campaigns or something like that. Go-to-market includes everything from the product you design in relation to the strategic opportunity, through all of the testing, the sales, the marketing, the distribution, the customer service, the customer support, and all of the activities to get customers to purchase again. So it's a whole range of activities there. All of these activities must be in alignment for you to deliver the value proposition and then get the value exchange that you want. And also for you to be able to use your data and metrics to identify where you can adjust to do an even better job of delivering value. So maybe it's time to stop talking in the abstract here and start to throw in a few examples here. And some of them I'm going to throw in may be bad examples where the inconsistency was there. I mean, one thing you and I have seen because of our ties to universities, Tom, is that what students are seeing in the promotional materials from universities may not match what students are hearing about the universities in the news, given all of the activities, all of the problems uncovered in relation to the student protests last year, throughout the course of the year. That universities will talk in terms of welcoming all students, learning experiences, well, benefits, come here and participate in all of these good things, while students may be afraid of being caught up in all of the bad things that are happening. This is discord in go-to-market. This is discord in messaging, possibly also in things like product delivery, certainly in terms of execution of the go-to-market plan of the universities. And it's interesting to see how the universities are starting to work this through for themselves. But right now, this is a place where there's a mismatch. Another place in
Deirdre, you may want to stop for a second here and emphasize this point because you're on a really, really important point, the one that I think is the most important of all in this, and it is what is the objective of your value exchange?
correct.
And because you're trying to match the objective of your value exchange, you're trying to match that against a market need or desire, right? That's what you're trying to do.
Correct.
And now, assuming that you're trying to match it against the need or desire, if what you're trying to do is to change something, that's a whole different world. And I think what we've seen is that universities are caught, as are many, I mean, we could name Jaguar, Bud Light, the election. I mean, we could name a bunch of different things where it appears that there are heavy people expecting a certain type of value exchange, yet it wasn't delivered properly, right? I mean, one could argue right now, and I wouldn't expect you to know this because I'm a little bit of a car nerd, even though I drive Jeeps, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, um, Jaguar is caught up in this a little bit right now, where they have a car ad, Deirdre, that doesn't show a car. It just is trying to influence people's view of something. And I'm not even clear what, actually. And that's also part of the problem, nor is it appears some of the marketplace. When you're caught like that, the question I asked myself when I saw that is, are they trying to exploit an opportunity or are they trying to change something? I think they're trying to change something. And for whatever reason, I can't even see what it is they're trying to change. And this is what you and I do for a living. We try to understand these things. Now, just because I don't doesn't mean you can't, right? I'm sure there are people that can. It's just that it's not clear to me. The same thing is true that we could give other names, and we don't need to give them, but very well-known names where it was not clear what they're trying to accomplish. And that's, I think, more because we're not clear about what they expect that value exchange to be, right? What do they expect the goals to be? By the way, as you and I've said before, some people, they they don't care about the they're not as worried about the exchange as they were. They want to influence something, and they'll be willing to do what it takes to influence something or change something. Those aren't the value exchanges that you and I are we spend our time on, right? We spend our time on the ones where we're trying to exploit something or make
Right.
something better or whatever. And my argument again, I don't want to miss the point. I am sure many of those people think they're trying to make things better, right?
Yes.
It's just not clear to me how. And by the way, that could just be the blind spot that I have or you have or that somebody else has. And but be that as it may, we're into that territory. And that's why I wanted to stop you and let you spend a minute on this subject, because without that core, or why are you doing this? And then your point to us is, look, make sure that your go-to-market work achieves that, will achieve it for you because you're the one that has set that. And then, in order to assure that it does and it stays that way, design an appropriate measurement and adjustment system around it before you get going. And so that's kind of your message to us, I think, on this topic. And I think it's a good one because um, I've had some interesting conversations with somebody who I respect the living daylights out of their intellect and their capabilities. And I just don't understand his view of a value proposition, his view of a value exchange, a large value exchange. He doesn't think it's working, and I do. Because we don't see and we can't get to the bottom of, okay, well, what is the real purpose of the value exchange? And I'm sure there are plenty of people, they're either really confused about what we're talking about or they know exactly what we're talking about. It depends on how successful we've been. But take a moment on this, Deirdre, because I think right this moment, as the world is rapidly accelerating, right, and we know it is, and it's changing, this is the time again that it's critical that you watch this because otherwise you may miss something or you may not adjust quickly enough. So I'm going to stop there. I'll, I'll take the breath I wasn't supposed to take in the first place, that I inserted there. But I didn't want you to move through this because this is such an important aspect, this tie of the objective of your value exchange to or the goal to the go-to-market to the metrics.
And well, actually, I'm glad you paused the discussion and explained further because you've been bringing up a critically important point that you and I discuss topics almost as discrete topics sometimes, but everything that we discuss across everything is eventually all tied together, and we try to do tying together as we go forward. But part of what you're talking about right now is along these lines that remember that the first part of a value exchange is the value proposition. And the
Yes.
value proposition is only valid if what an entity offers is accepted by the population. And then the organization needs to do the calculation of whether the market segment that accepts that value is large enough, lucrative enough, willing to pay so that they can then therefore get the value exchange back. And I'm not sure that some organizations are doing that part of the calculation. Sometimes if they're trying to create change, they may be forgetting the whole concept of they need to establish the value out there so they can get the exchange. They need to understand whether their target marketplace is even there, or if it's large enough for it to be worth their while to be embarking on this campaign of change. And I think you and I have seen so many examples over the past few years of companies that may not be going down this line of thinking. Remember, the purpose of an exchange is to get the resources back to the original entity that allow it to continue on its mission. Most of the time, it's revenue. People pay for a product because they perceive value in it. If you're a not-for-profit entity, it's that the goals of the organization are being met in a way that creates satisfaction to the people making donations to the not-for-profit organization and so forth. And I don't know that organizations are always thinking this through. And then when you layer on top the whole idea that it's your full go-to-market campaign across all of the items that I just mentioned, all of which must be aligned, that is your method of trying to create your value proposition out there, that people get lost and stumbled and forget how some things can throw it off. I'm going to jump immediately to a not-for-profit example because I think it explains some of this. And this is the recycling in the city I live in. I live in a city that has a good recycling program. Every week, I wheel out a recycling bin, and the recycling people come along and pick up my recycling and take it away. The value prop for me is that my city is doing something to manage garbage in a way that's favorable to the environment. The exchange is that I feel good about this. Now, meanwhile, while that part of it is working, I put my stuff out, the truck comes along and picks it up. We're starting to get a lot of coverage in the press about how recycling isn't working for cities. That many recycling programs, and it's unclear what really happens when the trucks get to some place, um, many recycling companies don't handle the materials properly. They just dump it all together. The people aren't there to sort things out, so things wind up in landfills anyway, and the program is worthless, or else the items are shipped to third world countries, creating environmental problems there. All of a sudden, the value exchange is lost for me. I do not want to pollute third world countries. I do not want my recycling thrown in with general garbage and winding up in landfills and therefore polluting the environment. So something in the whole string of go-to-market here is not aligned for me, and that is disturbing my perception of the value prop and destroying the concept of value exchange back. Now, I don't know the Jaguar campaign you're talking about, but I wonder if there's some problem somewhere in what I've just been talking about where there's some sort of disconnect. Maybe they're not going to be getting the return from a large enough target market segment for it to be worth their while going down this train of thought. And maybe this is something we keep an eye on going forward.
So, Deirdre, that just so that you don't feel alone here, so a few years ago, um, I got a phone call from a police detective in Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's when I was had a home in Connecticut, and he asked me where did I have a professional garbage collection company, and did I recycle? And I said, yes, to both. And he said, well, do you ever dump your garbage in Long Island Sound? And I said, not on a regular basis, I don't. Turns out they had found an envelope from like somebody that I had put into paper recycle, and it floated on shore in Bridgeport.
A perfect example of how to destroy a value exchange. You know, you
Well,
want to
I
pull
mean,
this out.
I was wondering, how am I going to prove to this fellow that I don't do that, right? I mean, how do you prove that kind of a thing? Anyway, he was very understanding. He was really more just he was just more trying to find out information, like who was the group and so forth. But that was a little jarring. So it is not a spurious uh, happenstance that you're talking about. We all know that there is reality in that, but you're right. It destroys trust in that, and that's part of the problem with a lot of this, Deirdre. And I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but this is really hitting home that there's a difference in, and this is something that it continues to bother me. I call it the expectation of a customer, right? All customers, I believe, have an expectation, and they have an expectation for something. And they vary that based on their own desires and their own needs and why they do what they do, right? And there's a great short story, I know you know it, A Well-Lighted Place, I think is what it's called by Hemingway. It's a short story. I think that's right, isn't it? Called that?
It sounds right, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful story. It's a mismatch of understanding customer expectation. Why was the person going to that diner late at night? It wasn't to get food, right? It was for the well-lighted place. And it was that, but never understand. There were three people involved, and only one understood it, and the other person didn't. And it was that wonderful story that's elucidating this point. And that story keeps coming home to me. You said it also that the market has to want it. But the question is, what's the objective? And do they care? Right? I may set up a value exchange where I don't care whether the market wants it now or not, because I think I need to change the market. One could argue that, for example, Steve Jobs got way ahead of the market many times with his products. He did it with, I won't even get into the various examples because most people know them, but he many times it was viewed that he was way ahead of time in the market. So he just believed you'll figure it out, right? You'll figure out how to use it, even though something like this, can't see it, the pen for my iPad, it took me 2 years to figure out how do I use it well, really well. I still am not a big fan of the remote control that comes with an Apple TV. I mean, but you know what? So much else of the design that he put into what he was doing made sense to me. But he was of that opinion that I need to influence market. BMW cars were that way for a long time. Their designs were, we are really good engineers. We're going to engineer it the way we think it should be engineered, and you will eventually like it. I'm not sure the marketplace has, in general, a lot of the marketplace these days in the Western world has that expectation of usability. I think they have a little bit more of a personal desire, and they don't necessarily always like to be led in that way. But that's what you're getting at. You're getting at, look, make sure you know not just why you're doing it, but what you expect in return. And that's the most important part. It's the exchange piece. And that because of the exchange piece, you have set the right expectation. First of all, you set the right expectation in place for yourself. You have now put in place the right actions for go to market that will give you that, or you expect it to give you that, and that you put the right measurements in place to make sure you know you're getting it, right? And that's or not know, but you have the indicators, the key indicators that indicate you're headed in the right direction. if that's all you leave everybody with today, which might be it, Deirdre, because we only have about 10 minutes and I've taken up a way too big a time on this one today. And this was your idea for this one. This wasn't even my idea for this one. But it rings so true, Deirdre, with what, you know, take the universities. And I know I'm again monopolizing time, and I promise you I will give you every bit of the last 10 minutes.
No, 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 talk as much as you want. Go ahead.
Yes, that's said with that New England edge to it. No, seriously though, Deirdre, that it's what do the customers expect and who is the customer? Some people say, well, it's the student. Some people say, well, it's who pays. Now, a lot of cases, times it is the student who pays, right? They're working the jobs and getting the debt to pay, right? And they end up paying for the rest of their lives. Understanding what it is and what that exchange is really, really critical. And I think we're going to be going through a real serious time here over the next few years in many, many areas, right? Including in international affairs and foreign policy and country to country relationships. I think we're going to see major effort here. And so that's why this subject, even though it sounds kind of dry, is a really important one that we keep in elucidating the idea of a value exchange. So with that, Deirdre, you have the last 10 minutes.
Well, let's stay on examples because this is the sort of thing that is best seen in examples. And I'm going to switch to one. It's sort of a dual example of both cable television and streaming television. Now, we both remember when cable television came out. That was sometime in the 1970s, wasn't it? When you started to first get the cable channels. I was living in Manhattan, and all of a sudden, you couldn't get TV reception unless you had a cable box, a big box sitting on top of your TV. Don't know why all of a sudden there was the need for the box, but regardless, so there was value created by signing up with a cable TV company simply to get cable TV reception. But then there were these massive things, new channels, and all of a sudden people had all of this variety and all of these options. This was a big value exchange here. Where not only did this thing make it possible for you to continue what you were doing, that is, continue to watch television, but it also gave you this whole other universe of options for entertainment. And it became overwhelming. And well, you know, I don't watch much TV anyway, Tom, so I certainly didn't take advantage of it. Now let's see what's happening now. People have been for the past 5 years or so discontinuing their cable services because they have other options here. They have their smartphones, talk about Apple, which now are eliminating some of the needs for some of the communication services that people might have been getting from their cable companies, given the bundles that these companies put together. But also, there's this whole option of streaming. And the streaming really kind of comes out of some of the services that started to operate on mailing CDs of movies to people. This is Netflix, which then got a big following, then moved that all to streaming. And all of a sudden, we're seeing streaming options, which means you can discontinue your cable service. The value exchange ended for cable. And they can do whatever go-to-market campaigns they want to do and can do, and they will still have trouble in reestablishing their value exchange. That's something to understand that at a certain point, it may be that a company loses the marketplace so entirely that they cannot do a go-to-market campaign to reestablish even just a value prop and therefore a value exchange. But now let's look at streaming. That there are problems with streaming. And this has to do with all of the aspects of go-to-market. Product delivery, product itself is not in the shape that everyone wishes it would be. For example, there was a big boxing match on Netflix, I think, the other day. I didn't watch it, but I've heard about this. And apparently there were problems in lags in delivering the content. And that interfered with the value perception, the value proposition to the audience. Now, I understand a lot of people watched anyway, but I've got to believe there was a lot of negative publicity because they didn't even get the product right. But let's stay on streaming television anyway. Right now, the average viewer, you and me, for example, well, we're not average, we don't watch television, but the average people who do watch television are besieged by the concepts of bundles. And it's what's bundled into these various services. And I saw a chart a couple of months ago, which had, okay, if you want these three channels, you go with this service. If you want those two channels plus this other channel, you've got to go with this service. If you want these four channels, you've got to get two. This is becoming overwhelming. That the whole concept of bundling of individual streams of content is becoming not just overwhelming, but downright annoying to people. This has to be rectified in some way. What we are seeing in streaming right now is a problem that I think the streaming services didn't anticipate, that people are apparently pausing. They're watching something that they want to watch, and then they're putting their service on pause until something else comes along that they want to watch, and then they renew their service and so forth, thereby interfering with the opportunity exchange for a company, that is, interfering with the revenue stream for a company. So these sorts of things, however much the streaming services may think they're winning the battle against cable, they're still leaving an awful lot of value on the table because they're not doing it well. And I think you have something to say on this, Tom. So
So
I'm
yeah,
gonna let you go.
I'm enjoying this because, well, first of all, one thing is the smart cable companies moved to delivering strong internet services, right? So that they can make over this, right? So that was the cool thing. So there were some of those folks were really right on it, right?
Right.
Now, what I loved about your example about the boxing match, Deirdre, and it has to do with also with all professional sports, is the rise of gambling, and then also the rise of gambling companies being major advertisers and supporters of this activity, and the fact that a lot of the gambling is tactical, right? And so when they lose service, you can only imagine the conflict with the gambling, and especially even some of the gambling statistics in football, for example, because some of it is live. You know, how many of this will this person in this team do? I don't gamble, but I study it, the area. So it's fascinating because I have all these vices I don't do that I would do if I let myself do it, but I come from a family of people that have serious addictions, so I try to stay away from everything. No, I really do try to stay away from it. But anyway, it's fascinating because there's that interplay with this, and it's going to get really interesting as this stuff sharpens up. And this is why in football, I know you know this, that because you're a football fan, although it's questionable that you could be a football fan being a Giants fan, Deirdre. I mean, really.
They'll get better.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. I really do. You may even be able to bet on that one.
Right.
But but anyway, the thing is that it's going to force it to happen, right? It's
Right.
going to have to, because you can't let that happen. You know, the thing that you were talking about with the pausing of the things, I did that, right? Because I didn't want I don't want all the stuff that's on Peacock, right? What I wanted Tour de France, right? You wanted the Olympics. I
Right.
wanted Tour de France. The moment Tour de France was over, I dropped the thing, and I'll pull it back now. If there were enough other things on it, and if I'd been interested in the Olympics, I could have carried over and seen the Olympics. But it's not. I have other things that take up my time. I know you know. But this whole you're right in the very mix of this, and it's fascinating to watch these businesses and these businesses maneuver this territory. But I'm telling you, the live action combined with gambling is a big deal. I'm going to let you take and land the plane from here, Deirdre.
Well, what you're just pointing out here now is remember in this new digital age, you don't always have companies just operating by themselves. You have companies operating in business ecosystems or companies operating on platforms which require participation by other entities as well. So what you really get here is the multiplier factor. That think about the value exchange for those gambling companies. I know very little about sports gambling, but I've got to believe that they put all of that advertising money, which is their go-to-market plan, into an event like this in the expectation that the audience would perceive the value there and that the gambling company would get not only the goodwill, but also the revenue from its bettors. So when their partner in this, whatever degree of partnership they had, made a mess of its go-to-market part of the whole thing, then you have another go-to-market disrupted, and you have two companies not achieving their value exchanges. And this is on, we're only talking about two companies here, but when you think about business ecosystems, this can be multiplied across 5, 6, 7 interlocked companies now trying to make their value exchanges work in relation to other entities here, and something isn't happening. A good example, and I'll throw this out, is publishing companies in relation to bookstores that, as you know, the bookstore market, and we talked about this a couple of videos ago, the bookstore market is fluctuating given the Amazon and all of the ways of ordering books and so forth. But publishers depend on bookstores to not only sell books, but to also host author events, to do their publicity, so that if the shrinking market of bookstores interferes with the go-to-market plan of the publishing companies, in that it makes it more difficult for them to find venues to host author events, then you have another decline in a paired value exchange here. So it becomes fascinating when you see it. I'll wind up with one more thought that we sometimes say that we're pointing things out, that now that you've heard us, you'll recognize this in the marketplace when you see it. So I'm going to suggest to our viewers that when they start to think about value exchange and a value exchange not working, that they start to look at the go-to-market campaigns of the company and figure out what's not working so the value exchange itself is not working. As you say, Tom, a very complex subject, and we'll be coming back to this.
Yes, it's fascinating. It's well, you and I think it's the core. We think it's the core. If you start there, you can back your way into understanding business. If you don't understand the true nature of value exchange, that's why we say it is the result. It is what you achieve, whether it be for profit, not for profit, governmental entities, whatever. It's what you're achieving, and some people take it to an extreme and define all personal relationships that way. I think that's taking it too far, but there are some personal relationships that do deserve a value exchange analysis, Deirdre.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, not ours. We
Not
stay
ours.
friends. We stay friends. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, it is, Tom. So long for now.